What's going on? My name is Robert, and you are watching Southpaw Autoworks. On the bench today, we've got the 4L60E. In this episode, I'm going to show you how to tear it down and get all of the sub-assemblies out of the transmission case. We'll be going over the tools and the techniques to make this transmission fun to work on. Without further ado, let's dive in. On the bench today, we've got a 4L60E. It happens to be the earliest of 4L60Es, a 93, and I'm going to show you what I do to tear it down. So let's get to it. So I always begin with removing the extension housing, and I like to take this the output seal and remove that before I remove the housing off of the trans. I use the weight of the transmission to act as a vise so I can get the seal out quickly and easily. And out she comes. All right, now we'll remove the bolts from the housing. Got a square cut seal. It comes off. Throw it off to the side. Normally you would have a speed sensor in here, but it's missing. 10mm bolt, pull that out. They're hard to get out from the outside, but you can get a screwdriver or a pry bar in there and gently pop it out. All right. Flip the trans around. Take this off. All right. Next is a little bit of house cleaning. As you can see, this case is nice and clean. It's been taken apart, cleaned, reassembled, waiting for its moment to be on the bench here in front of the camera. But at any rate, typically this would be filthy. There's tons of dirt, not necessarily up here on the connector or inside of it, but just down and around the connector. Dirt likes to hang out in there, and it makes it impossible to get this connector to go back down inside the case when it's filled full of dirt. So get a wire brush, pocket screwdriver or scribe, get all that dirt out of there, blow it out, brake clean, blow it again, whatever it takes to get that clear, because once we roll this thing over and we get the valve body off, we're going to want to get that off, and we need to have the dirt out of there. Another house cleaning item here is the snap ring around this 2/4 servo. You can get the snap ring out if this thing's caked with dirt, but trying to get this cover out becomes a problem if it's got a lot of dirt on there, so I clean that out first. All right, we're gonna get the snap ring out on this 2/4 servo. So to get this servo out of the bore, we need to remove the snap ring. They've got these two cutouts at the entry of the bore there to get underneath or behind the snap ring and pop it out. Get the screwdriver right up under the snap ring. Get the pocket screwdriver out. Just work your way around. Out comes the snap ring. All right. Get this cover out. And it'll only come out about that far. And then you've got to grab this blue O-ring right here. And you can pull it and just stretch it. Take some side cutters. Cut it. Gently grab it. Pull it out. Work your cover out. Pull the rest of the servo out, just stack it on there, and we'll set it to the side for later. Alright, take a look at the pump here. Are we rolling? Mm-hmm. That seal broke. It's hard. The 4L60E can be outfitted with a number of different input shafts, depending on year and application. This transmission utilizes an input shaft that looks like this. Pay attention to the O-ring. This O-ring is used for the torque converter clutch, and I happen to remove this O-ring just out of habit during the disassembly. However, removal of this O-ring is not necessary for the disassembly of the transmission. Other 4L60E transmissions utilize an input shaft that looks like this, and in this case, the O-ring has to be removed in order to disassemble the transmission. So next we're going to pull these pump to case bolts out, but before we do that, we want to check the end play. End play is the movement, the fore and aft or front to rear movement of this input shaft. Probably not going to be able to see it, but you should be able to hear it. So what we want to do is measure that, and we can do it quickly and get a rough measurement with the dial caliper. Here's how I use the dial caliper to get both of my measurements. Do that again. So we grab a measurement with the shaft all the way out, which is 2 inches, 2 whole inches, and 470 thousandths. Then we push the shaft in, measure again, and we've got a measurement of 2 and 449 thousandths. Subtract the 2 and that's your end play. It's good to know this before you take the transmission apart, because if you're lucky enough to not have any hard parts failures within the unit, you can reuse all the same hard parts, and now you already know what the end play is going to be when you go back together. And if you need to create more end play or reduce the end play, you already have a number to work with. Don't own one of these or currently know how to use one of these? You can find everything you need in the video description down below. These bolts do have O-rings in them, act as a seal. Alright, next we'll pull the pan off. Pull the pan off. Like I said, this thing's been out and cleaned already, so the magnet on there is like spotless, the pan spotless. They're never this clean when they're getting torn down. Gasket comes off nice and easy. Sometimes these will be stuck to the pan, or even worse, stuck to the case. Normally at this point in the teardown, I'd be removing the oil filter from the transmission. However, I unfortunately did not have the correct oil filter on hand for this video. There are a number of oil filters for the 4L60E. You've got the shallow oil filter designed for the shallow oil pan, and then there are a number of deep filters designed for the various deep oil pans. Removing the oil filter is very easy. Simply place a screwdriver underneath the oil filter and gently lift to pull it off of the transmission. Just be mindful of the wiring harness, as you don't want to pinch a wire with the screwdriver. So now we got to get the electrical undone and get this valve body off of here. In order to get the valve body off, we got to start by getting all of this electrical off, which begins with removing these connectors. If you look closely, this one's busted. It pulls right out like that, and it should not. It should look like this one right here. As you can see, some of the connectors on these harnesses had busted off. Pretty common, especially if they get overheated or just aged. It's plastic, like any other plastic, it gets brittle. But to get them off and not break them, if that's possible, and this one I can tell it's already breaking, what you want to do is gently get a pocket screwdriver under there, and you just rotate it upwards a little bit while you wiggle that off, and then they won't break, unless of course they're brittle like this one. TCC solenoid. These are your shift solenoids, and then your EPC solenoid. Get those disconnected. As previously mentioned, this is an early 4L60E. The stamping on the valve body indicates that this unit was manufactured in 1993. Valve bodies that were manufactured in 93 and 94 include a pressure switch and 4 solenoids. In 1995, GM added a 5th solenoid, this PWM lockup solenoid. If you're working on a 95 and up 4L60E, you'll need to remove this PWM solenoid in order to gain access to the on-off TCC solenoid located below it. The retaining clip on this PWM solenoid can be a little tricky to remove. You can take a paper clip and modify it to look like this and gain access to the clip like so. Or you can use a pocket screwdriver, like so, to remove the clip. Just know that when this retaining clip does let go of the PWM solenoid, it will want to shoot up and out. So keep your free hand hovering right above where the retaining clip's going to come out to protect your face and to keep the clip from flying off into the abyss. And don't forget to wear eye protection too. The harness is held on by a couple of these bolts. And now our case connector is holding it into the transmission case, but we can't get that out yet until we get this valve body out of the way. Most of these bolts are 10 millimeter, however these 3 are 8 millimeter heads. If you're concerned about forgetting where those came from, just take a screwdriver, scratch a little X right over the bolt holes. When you go back together, you'll know that those are those special bolts. All right, lift this up and disconnect from our manual valve there. That link hooks up to that, comes undone. Normally, had we not already been into this transmission before, there'd be a gasket on there and we would have lost a number of check balls that would have all fell down there. Here's a separator plate that's out of another 4L60E, a later version. Still got the gaskets on it, so I mean, this is what you would have been looking at. Next, we get the accumulator off of here. This plate off. Now our separator plate comes off. Again, missing the gaskets, but there it is. You'd have another check ball in the body here that you'd need to fish out. And we actually have it right here. And now we have access to the case connector. This case connector is damaged, so I don't need a special tool to get it out. It comes right out like that. But normally, I've got another one here that's not damaged. Normally it would look something like so. It's got 4 fingers on it all the way around that compress. And there's a special tool that's used to compress that. But again, you got to have the dirt and all that stuff out from behind it, or else it will not collapse when you go to squeeze it, and then it won't come out of the case. Now we got to get the park pawl bracket out of the way. You don't need that to. You don't need this out of the way to gut most of the trans. But if you want to get the low reverse piston out, you got to get this stuff out of the way first. So throw the vehicle into park. Just so you know, if it won't go into park, just rotate the shaft while you're pushing, and it'll lock in. That out of the way. Take it out of park. Lift it up. Out it comes. And that allows the pawl to come out of the way. Comes completely out of the inside of the case, or out of the gut stack bore, and that'll now be out of our way when we go to knock the low reverse piston out of the case. Get a magnet, grab a band anchor, wiggle that out. That's going to make disassembly a whole heck of a lot easier. And now we just need to get this accumulator piston out. Down in this channel is the port that feeds that. Take your blowgun. Gonna have to take this tip off because it will not fit down in there. Stick that right into the port and hit it. But I'm gonna roll this over because I don't want it blowing out and hitting me. There are screens down in the casting or the channels of the valve body. There's typically one here because there's an orifice downstream of there. And a tiny little hole, and debris don't do well together. It gets plugged really easily, so they put a screen in there, and there happens to not be one there right now. But there is one up here in this other spot, if I can get it out. It's just falling further in. There it is. So there's what that looks like, and this thing's pretty dirty. Got to get this pin out for the accumulator piston, and we are now ready to pull the pump out and start pulling the guts out of this thing. This is the pump puller. These jaws here at this end grab on to the stator. Get it tightened down. this down. And then we're going to start pulling the pump out. But at the same time, we've got drums that are attached to the pump that we need to make sure they detach. Take a screwdriver down into here. I'm just wiggling while I'm turning. See, we're coming out now. I'm using the screwdriver to separate the input reverse drum from the pump. Typically the drum wants to come out with the pump, however when it does, it doesn't work out so well. Real close. That should be it. There it is. And out comes our pump. Got a thrust washer, gasket, and then around the outside of it, got a seal. Away. We'll just set this off to the side and we'll tear that open during our inspection. If you look inside here, we've got our input reverse drum and then our input drum, which is attached to the shaft. All this needs to come out, but first we need to make sure that this band, this is our 2/4 band, we need to make sure that that's loose. And if you recall, we had that anchor coming through the valve body. Having that pulled out from the top made our job a lot easier. So now we just pull this thing out, set it down. But if we weren't able to get this band undone, it would have caught on this.
There we go.
If we hadn't gotten the band dismounted or removed, it would have caught on this section of the input drum, making it impossible for us to get this assembly out. Set our band to the side. Now inside of here, we've got some planetary and our sun gear, ring gear and planetary, but we've got a little yellow snap ring down in there that we've got to get out before we can remove any more of the planetary gear set. Snap ring pliers. And I am a lefty, in case you couldn't tell, so I am going to just grab the snap ring gently, and I'm going to try to rotate it over to like the 9 o'clock position or somewhere where my hand is comfortable, because where I'm at right here is not working. There we go. Rotate it just like that, and then off it comes. With that out of the way, we can now pull more of the internals out. Got our ring gear, our planet, bearing, sun shell with the washer still tacked into there. And we've got a reaction sun gear, if I can grab it. Don't want to come out. There it comes. Reaction sun gear. All this stuff out of the way. All right, next we need to pull a snap ring. This is our center support. This acts as the pressure plate for the low reverse clutch, and it also houses the one-way clutch, which is used for first gear. But this whole thing is held into the case with this large yellow snap ring, so we need to get that out next. I've got my snap ring removal tool here. I actually have a video on how to make this super easy and cheap. Maybe. So I got one end of the snap ring lifted up, and now I'm going to take my pocket screwdriver, stick it under there to keep that from popping back out. Now we can grab the snap ring, pull it inwards towards the center of the circle, and pull it out. And there it is. Like I said, it was painted yellow at one point in time. All right, I've got some snap ring pliers here, and I'm going to show you what the anti-clunk spring does down inside the transmission case, and what you need to do to get this center support, the next part in here, what you need to do to get it out. So up in here in the case is the anti-clunk spring. I can't see now. I'm going to put one end of the snap ring pliers up against the case, and then the other end of the snap ring pliers is going to be against the center support. And I'm going to show you, we're going to work against the spring to show you what the spring does. So the spring keeps that center support rotated in a certain direction. In order to get the center support out, we're going to have to push on this output shaft from the backside. We're going to be pushing it forward. But if we do that and that alone, the center support isn't going to come out very easily, because it's real common for these outer lugs on the center support to wear into or eat into the aluminum case, the aluminum lugs. That's a real common problem on these.
The anti-clunk spring pushes the center support in this direction. However, we need to push it and hold it like so in order to get the center support out of the case.
Most of them aren't bad enough that you need to replace the transmission case or anything like that. But when you're trying to get the center support out, they get caught in the little groove that's worn into the lugs. So I'm going to show you how I get it out. So I'm going to orient the transmission this way. Pay attention to the output shaft. I'm going to put it down into the gutter here of the teardown bench. I'm actually going to be resting it right against that, so I have something to push against. But I'm going to leave a little bit of space to begin with. I'm going to take the snap ring pliers and I'm going to compress that spring, or actually I'm going to be rotating the center support in a manner that moves it away from the wear marks inside the case. And I'm going to hit this against the bench, which is essentially like hammering on the or pushing on that side of the shaft, but I can't do that and this at the same time. So it takes two people, or if it's just you and you don't have any help, this is what you do. Oh, it's almost there. It is there. Yep, it's there. Let me bring this back around so you can see. So now that it's past that, we can grab this. This again is our center support, and it also acts as a pressure plate for this clutch pack that's down there, and it also acts as a one-way clutch. Rotates one way, locks the other. There's our clutches and steels. those clutches, the teeth on those, spline to these lugs on this rear planetary gear set. Let's get this stuff out of the way. And here is the anti-clunk spring. And now we need to get this ring gear out and the output shaft. And the output shaft is actually going to go out towards the rear, but it is pressed onto that ring gear, which is not completely uncommon. All right, so like I said, we've still got the output shaft inside the transmission, and the ring gear is still in there, and the two are pressed together apparently. And like I said, it's not completely uncommon for that to happen. It's common for them to not be pressed together and the shaft come right out, but this is the case sometimes. I mean, I'm pulling on that and it doesn't want to come out. So I'm gonna have to take my hammer. I don't want to use the business end of this hammer. I'm gonna use the soft end here in this handle. I'm actually gonna hit the hit the output shaft and try to knock it free from the ring gear. Just like that. Now I can grab the ring gear. It comes out. It's got our bearing. And we'll inspect that in the next video. And then if you look down inside the case, so looking down inside the case, now we can see that there's our low reverse piston and the return spring assembly for it. And that's the last bit that we need to knock out. While you're looking down in there though, I wanted to show you this park pawl that we disassembled. With that in, it's in the way of that piston. We try to blow the piston out, it's gonna strike the park pawl and it's not gonna get very far. So that's why we had to take that apart when we were removing the valve body and all the other stuff under the pan. All right, so we've got the case emptied. We've got our planetaries out. And we're gonna, in the next video, show you how to inspect all that stuff. Got our input reverse drum. And our input drum that contains the forwards and the 3/4 clutches, which are very problematic on this transmission. The pump, the servo over here, all that, we're gonna be tearing into all this to look closely at everything and inspect what we got, see if we need to replace anything, maybe talk about some upgrades, but all that will be done in the next video.
Thanks for joining me on this episode. If you enjoyed this particular video, let me know by hitting the like button. I would love to hear from you. Drop me a line in the comment section down below. If you haven't done so already, subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. If you're interested in helping this YouTube channel grow, there are a number of ways that you can get involved. For more information, check out the video description down below. Catch you next time.